Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Property Lifestyle Mastery Podcast. I'm Jackie Tomes, and on this show, we are all about enjoying freedom and everything that means thanks to property, and making sure that we can let go of anxiety, worry, and guilt along the way. And today is a great conversation about that. We're talking about surrender. What is surrender? What is this art of surrender? And how do you balance this hard work, tenacity, bashing down walls to get things done, with actually letting go and allowing? It's a bit of a conundrum that seems to feel like there's two ideas that conflict themselves, but actually when you can start to wrap your head around this, you can find way more flow, joy, and ease in what you're doing, and ultimately that puts you on the path to freedom. So it's a really important area to dive into. So today, it's myself and Dom talking about the art of surrender. Hello, Dom.
Hello, Jackie. What a gorgeous day it is.
Another day, another episode. So today we are talking about a book that's called The Surrender Experiment by a guy called Michael Singer. You have done some lovely preparation in terms of looking up an overall summary that you're going to share. But I just wanted to kick off by just explaining why we wanted to talk about this today. If you haven't already read the book, you can decide off the back of this if you want to. But really, this is about what surrender really means, what surrender really means if you are building a business, and like how does that work in reality? How do you keep control and push to grow something whilst also surrendering? I think it's quite an abstract concept, which is why I absolutely loved this book, and think it's an amazing thing to just get us to question how we're approaching things. So that's why I wanted to discuss it. Like, tell me your thoughts about the book and a bit about what it's about.
Yeah. So the way I had learnt about it before was in the terms of letting go, and a book I've maybe mentioned before by Dr. David Hawkins called Letting Go. And it's all very well and it's kind of esoteric and maybe spiritual. But when you hear this book or read this book that Michael Singer wrote and how he applied it and actually became a multi-billionaire and CEO of a massive company, but he was also applying that rule to his life, and as a result living a much happier, easier going, and arguably more successful life. That's when it goes, okay, I really need to learn this, because it's all very well letting go, but actually there's stuff to be done in life as well, isn't there? So yeah, in summary of the book, he is a chap who really got into, you could call it spirituality, and spirituality is, in his words, the unspoken. So it's quietening the mind so that you can allow a new voice in. And that's sort of the guidance of maybe the universe or God, energy, chi, whatever you want to call it. So he was a great meditator. He meditated a couple of hours a day, and he bought a plot of land, built a house, and he even built a temple on that house. And someone spotted it, so I loved the work that you did. That's incredible. Could you do something like that for me? And so that chance, the passion of meditating, creating his temple, led to that meeting of another person who said, can you do this for me? Which then led to him creating a business called Built with Love. And so he built this carpentry business, and he was building homes for people and extensions. And then he got into programming. And from the programming, he started designing software for companies and selling tailor-made software as well as packaged software. And then eventually it led him into it was medical practice software. And that's where it really sort of took off in terms of scale. And he became the CEO of as I mentioned, million dollar organization that sold software to medical practices. And as he says, with great success comes great responsibility. And he was raided by the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, for fraud. But it wasn't him who'd obviously committed the fraud. It was one of the junior managers, well, not junior managers, but managers who were blaming it on the directors and the panel. And during that time, he had to step down from being a CEO. And in those 5 years of court battles, that is when he wrote his effectively first book, I think, and most famous book called The Untethered Soul, which is all about, that principle of that voice in your head and letting go and surrendering to the world around you. And yeah, it's just the most incredible story of continuously letting go, continuously surrendering to what happens to you and just allowing it rather than constantly pushing or causing tension, which so many of us live in, which causes us stress. So basically, he's not resisting. And he's also meditating every day and allowing that guidance to come in. So yeah, an unusual
Love it.
guy with sandals rather than suits, and but yeah, just an incredible story.
Incredibly successful. Oh my God, Dom, I think I've just opened up a new world for you, which is book summaries. That was beautiful.
Oh, thank you very
I don't know. I
much.
wish I knew how long that was. That's probably about like 3 minutes. And that was like beautiful. What a lovely voice you have. Like, so you can send me to sleep with that. Let's get you an audiobook. That was
Not the first
awesome.
person to have said that. I think that is a niche I need to investigate further.
Yes, all in good time. You just keep surrendering, and I think you end up there. Um, it's awesome. What was your like personally your main takeaway from the book? Like, what did you personally take from it, and did you make any changes in your life off the back of it?
Yes, and same question back to you once I've answered. So I guess because I had read the book Letting Go and was doing that sort of already, this one just gave it to me in a different perspective around doing it for business. For business, we're always pushing. It's like, oh, I need to do some marketing. I really need to do this, and there's kind of resistance, and actually, I don't really want to do it because it's not in my flow. But actually, when you kind of step back and you go for walks in nature, or you meditate, or you go fishing, any time where you are not working, that's when the best insights come. And also opportunities, like suddenly find a VA who can do that, or someone introducing me to someone who can do that thing that I didn't want to do, and they're way better at it than I ever would be. So actually, it's kind of looking at all the areas in your life where you're finding it difficult and going, what's the lesson I need to get here? What do I need to surrender to? And what's the easier way to effectively do it with less efforting? So yeah, personally, I would say it's made a massive difference. And obviously, you and I work together, and you're brilliant at delegating and saying no to stuff, and I learn a lot from that. So I think it's very subtle, but I've made some big changes. What would you say your changes are, and maybe even also what would you say what changes you've seen in me? Because it's sometimes easier to
Yeah,
see other people
interesting.
than it is to see ourselves.
I think it's for me, it was that shift from it's like tenacity versus
Mm.
letting go. Like for me and Dave, we'd always, I guess, identified with being very tenacious, hardworking people. We don't take no for an answer, like bashing through problems when they arise and making things very hard. I guess that's the resistance that you were talking about. And I guess it's been a bit of a journey for me off the back of reading that and many others. But I think that for me is like such a seminal book from going from just holding this tension, like you're saying, always thinking I have to bash through to get a result, actually realizing how much that bashing through is closing off other possibilities and options, which is a far easier road, the path of least resistance. And so
Mm.
I kind of went through a bit of a phase where I think almost like it kind of pushed me, I think, into a bit of grayness, first of all. Like it's like in a way, my first reaction was kind of like, oh, you just don't try, like you kind of just let go and you just stop trying to
Mm.
push. And actually that isn't actually it. Like for me, that was like a part of the process where you're kind of figuring out where the balance point and what the opposite of head bashing is. The opposite of head bashing is just doing f all, basically, like nothing, and feeling really quite despondent. So for me, I guess at first you could almost say it was a slightly negative journey to kind of almost course correct. But then having started to lean almost too far the other way to like, you know, just like open your arms, drop everything and just let go, suddenly
Mm.
realizing it's not about abdicating, it's not about not trying, it's
Yes.
not about not being tenacious. It's all about the volition behind all of that. So it's like you can do everything basically exactly the same, but you don't hold this tension and this resistance. So you let go of the anxiety, of the worry, of the stress, of the feeling of trying to control, and you do everything else exactly the goddamn same.
Yeah.
You go for it, you make things happen, you pick up the phone, you make calls, but then you just let it go and you go and carry on with your life and you go for a walk, as you say. And that ability to continue doing everything the same but without the tension means that it's like these little side roads open up. Like when we get stressed and anxious and push through, we get really tunnel visioned on the solution that we think is the solution, but we don't see all these tons of other options that are opening up down these little side roads, these little shortcuts, where you could arrive at your destination so much quicker. Or maybe it's a slightly different version of the same destination that's actually the right thing. Yes. That for me was the biggest shift.
Yeah.
How was that as an explanation? It's
quite
abstract.
That is a pretty freaking awesome explanation, Jackie, because I've got a one-liner which is like, it isn't giving up, it's absolutely keeping on going, but as you say, it's without the tension that everyone carries, and it's that tension which causes stress, which causes us health issues. So you absolutely, you do everything the same except carry that tension. And one of the best ways to not carry that tension is to observe the mind, because you're not your thoughts. Your thoughts are just a product of your brain. Your brain is an organ in the body, and you don't have to listen to it the whole time. You don't have to listen to all of those negative, in particular, feelings. So making sure that we take that time out to get perspective, to go, what am I resisting? And what do I need to stop resisting and allow to happen? And when you're in a better state because you're feeling good, that's when the universe has got your back. And that's when serendipity and other things like that, where people suddenly show up to, to save that situation or be the ideal solution to that situation. That's when, the universe is kind of silently going, it's okay, I've got this. And it's helping. Yes. So that it's not having tension and allowing and creating space for the solutions to come in by meditating.
A possibility. Yeah. It's in case you haven't heard, we're actually writing a book at the moment. It's called Focus Your Way to Freedom. And actually a lot of these things that we're touching on here, I've been just deep in the book over the last week or so, like getting all these ideas coming together. And like I think if you're a bit of a planner by nature, like I am, strategy, making a plan, deciding how you're going to get there, like always, if you in the past would have asked me, like, where do I see myself in 10 years? I'd have had a damn good answer to that question. You'd have been like, gosh, that's a woman with a fucking plan. But now, going through this whole process of just like playing around with surrender has really shifted that for me, because I've kind of realized that actually, if I know exactly where I'm going to be in 10 years and I know exactly the path to get there, like, for one, I'm choosing where that person in 10 years, the person who arrives at 10 years time from now is not who I am now. Right. So if I know exactly where I'm going to be in 10 years, that's where I'm currently going to be. But that's not who I want to be. Like, right. To become the future self, it's like, oh, I'm this version of me will be long dead and gone by then, be a new version. And so I now have actually a resistance. We went out for dinner with a couple of our investors a few months ago, and one of them asked me that question, and it was the first time in my life I've not been able to answer it. And like my old self wants to get in, like judging me, like you should know the answer to this question. Like somehow I'm not professional enough for knowing the answer, which isn't true. It's like, actually, no, for me, answering that question now, I almost don't want to answer. Yeah, I've got some ideas about the direction that we're heading in, but I want to be surprised by the potential of what could be there and what this new version of myself that will ultimately arrive there could do. And that has also been another byproduct of surrender and letting go.
I love that, because for two reasons. One is that, who are you to say that you know best? There's an incredible intelligence that has created this world that we live in, and it's not us, right? So to say that I'm going to be doing this and this is going to happen, all these other things, it's like you're kind of limiting yourself, because you're creating it from who you are now. And as you say, you're not going to be who you are now in the future. You're going to be someone else. You're going to be someone bigger and better. So allowing things to happen to get the lessons, and that leads me on to my second point, is actually seeing everything that happens to us as just that. All the difficulties we go through, really, they're just gifts. They're processes that we've got to go through to learn that particular skill set or that wisdom. And it's happening for us to help us learn and grow and awaken. And then we get the the accomplishment, the success. So it's seeing everything that is happening to us as helping us rather than resisting it, and then seeing the skills that we need to learn, and then as a result we get those amazing successes. So yeah,
just making me think of I'm reading another Michael Singer. It's not a book actually, it's just like essays by him, and he was talking about the fact that like we think things are random, but he was like, nothing is random. Like if you think what has had to happen for you to be exactly where you are right now, that is anything but random. Like you could go way back. The only reason you live here is because there's a lake. The only reason there's a lake is because however many billions of years ago the dinosaurs were here, a giant one put a footprint down, and then a load of water came up and filled this lake, and that's why you now live there, and your family settled there, and your mum met your dad there. Like there's just so many things. Like none of it is random, and we have influence over what happens, but we have far less control than we actually think. And actually, by us trying to get this just semblance of feeling like we're in control, we're actually missing it. Like we're missing the whole thing, this whole beautiful thing that's just like unfolding and happening and teaching us what we've got to learn to be able to grow and let go through, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. It does make me think though that there is never just one side, because of course there's chaos theory and various other things. So yes, life is organized. We have predeterminism, as in like maybe our life is predetermined, but at the same time it's not. It's completely, we do have free will, and you have to have both in order to have the whole. Life is dualistic. There's always life and death, there's hot and cold, one defines the other. So it's never just one thing, it's never just random or predetermined. It's going to be both. And that's the complexity and the amazingness of life. But yeah, this is getting deep.
True. There's definitely a whole podcast episode. I said to Dave the other day, we were about doing a picnic at a wine farm the other day, and I was like, Dave, do you think everything is predetermined? Well, that's what our Sunday afternoons basically consist of at the moment, is like pondering these kind of big questions. Because I feel like for me, the more I let go of stuff and just allow life to be and just focus on my own reaction to it and what I can learn through it, as you're saying, the more I feel in touch with like a deeper wisdom and intuition within myself. And the more that I'm in touch with that deeper wisdom within myself, it's almost like there's this pulling towards certain things that I couldn't feel before when I was so in my resistant state. And I feel there's some things in my life, like public speaking, for example, like it makes no sense that I've really been drawn into public speaking. Something keeps drawing me back to it, and things like opportunities open themselves up for me more and more on that side of things, that feels like it's a deeper pulling in a direction that I'm not trying to make happen. I'm just allowing life to present. And it's like the same with, I guess, the podcast. Actually, this podcast is a great example of this. I was always so resistant of doing a podcast. Everyone's banging on about having a podcast. You should have a podcast. I'm like, no, I don't want a bloody podcast. Like, no, thank you. And then as it was actually during probably about a year after, I reckon, that I read The Surrender Experiment, I was playing around with just letting go of stuff more and trying to go with the flow. And I went to, because of this letting go, Dave ended up reconnecting with Simon Tandry. You've just done a recording with Simon. Like, I don't know, you guys probably didn't go there on the call, but the reason that we reconnected with Simon was because he actually used to be a teacher of Dave when he was a musician. They hadn't spoken for years, and Dave got an intuition in a meditation.
Right.
I should reach out to Simon. Like, he just came to mind for no apparent reason. So Dave reconnected with Simon, which led to us spending quite a lot of time with Simon, his partner Simona, and obviously he's only on this podcast because of all of that unfolding the way that it did. And we kind of just allowed all that to kind of happen. Dave and I went on a retreat that Simon ran, and it was only because all of just allowing this to happen in a way that I just wouldn't have in my old version of myself. And it was on that retreat with Simon when he, just as an aside, said, you should check this podcast out called Bliss and Grit. It's a very spiritual podcast. And I started listening to it, and it was just the first time that I'd ever listened to a podcast. And I was like, oh, I get it. I
Mm.
get it. Like like for me, for what I was going through at the time, like the conversations they were having, I just felt like I was part of the conversation. I felt like they understood me and what I was going through. And I was just like, oh my God. And it was just like two people turned up. The two ladies who ran it, it's finished now, but there's like loads of episodes. They just would turn up and have a conversation. And it was just like, it was brilliant. And when I heard that, and because I'm in this whole like surrendering and
Yes.
letting go more, and then suddenly the idea feels like, actually, what about us doing a podcast? And
Mm.
only because of all of those things unfolding and me being more open to it, I was like, yes, I get it now. This is it. Like a podcast like that, where we're just having conversations about topics that are important to us, that we're going through. Like, we don't have all the answers. We're just sharing what we're going through. I got it. And like that, the way this podcast got launched and the reaction that we've had from it is just unprecedented in terms of anything really that I'd ever done
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
And that was the outcome of just letting go,
Really.
seeing what's presented, and taking the path.
Right. So you're getting the nudges, you're getting the
Mm.
intuition. So because people get intuition in different ways. Some people get smells, some people get visions, others hear not, a thought, a voice, just a feeling, perhaps. There's different ways of sentience, as they call it, to get these messages. Clearly, one way is through meditation. We've discussed that many times. What works for you? What have you seen works for other people when it comes to hearing or getting those nudges in the right direction?
Mm. I think, well, let me answer for myself, because I think still it's complicated, right? Like getting
Yes,
to this in our modern world, it's hidden under a load of crap.
absolutely. Yes.
um, so I think for me, yeah, meditation has been important, and kind of approaching life with a different way has been important, because just differentiating between the ego and excitement versus what's actually a deep intuition.
Yeah.
For me, I don't know that I could really access intuition. I think maybe I could as a kid. I can see in the
Mm.
past that I was drawn to things, and I can see how I kind of lost it. And then the more I've been willing to confront the scary parts of myself, the more there's kind of like this space that's opened up. So for me, yeah, I would sit in meditation, and it's normally towards the end of meditation that it's kind of can sound like a voice, like
Yeah.
kind of like guidance,
Yeah.
but it also can it can also feel like, and this is tricky because it's only just starting to feel this way. Like for me, I've off in my like lower stomach, I've had this like always this pulling, but it's kind of been more of a tension in the part, like this tension pulling, dragging me to do things. That hasn't been intuition, although I've kind of felt like it has been in the past. It's kind of like an excitement feeling that I should do. As I'm starting to let go of that, which Simon has been integral in helping me to kind of learn my feelings better,
Mm.
it's softening now, and now it's kind of becoming more like a gentle pulling towards something, like it's kinder and softer, and it doesn't feel like I have to do everything now.
Right.
Again, quite an abstract thing, but I hope that's making some kind of sense.
Yeah. And everyone's going to have different experiences, I guess. But one I think
Yeah.
people can relate to is that they get their best ideas when they're not at their desk. They get their best ideas in the
Yes.
shower. They get their best ideas when they're on
Mm.
holiday, when they're swimming, when they're running. Often when you're doing exercise and the body's active and the mind can just flow. So it's putting yourself regularly, I would say, in a situation where you're able to disconnect from the voice in your head the whole time, um, and just allow things to happen. So usually when you're out in nature, meditating, yeah, exercise, as I mentioned. Personally, for me, I get my best ideas when I'm out walking in the countryside, ideally with lovely views, possibly in the woods as well. And yeah, without a doubt, I'm on my own as well. So I think it's kind of putting yourself in situations where you can get that guidance and listen and suddenly notice when you get an idea and go, oh, okay, that's popped into my head. That's not random. That's the voice or the idea or the image that is actually trying to nudge you in the right direction. So a quick example, Michael Jackson would call up his agent at 3 o'clock in the morning. I've got this idea. You've got to write it down. It's this, and this. It's like, why can't you wait until the morning? He says, because if I don't action it, someone else will.
Wow. Oh
Interesting.
my God, that is That's intense.
It is, isn't it? I mean, he was obviously fairly obsessive, but I've got a friend who he's adamant that he invented the internet before, whatever his double-barreled name is, the guy who invented the internet. But he's like, no, I thought of that before him. Here's the thing: ideas come not just to you. I think they kind of almost land on the planet, and it goes to a few people, and it's the people who take action on it who get effectively the benefit.
Can I caveat this? Because I get and have had a lot of ideas. I also work with a lot of people who are very much like me in terms of like ideas people, and we know we can go and make stuff happen. So
Yes.
we just do.
Yes.
And I, in the past, would get this, what I thought was intuition, an idea, and I'd be like, go for it. Like, I don't know, I can't even think of something idea now, but an idea would come through and I would just be off and I would make it happen because I know that I can. I just get on and I just do it. And then, a few months passed and I'm like, I've got all these different things that I've started. I'm feeling weighed down by all the stuff that I've started. So for me, and maybe human design, I don't know if you've done a podcast yet on human design. That's something we could do. Like a human design as a tool has really helped me to understand like how to respond to intuition. So for me, and quite a lot of my more creator clients who I work with, if we have an idea, we should not action it straight away. We should sit on it for a period of time, depending on how big the decision is, at least a week, maybe even a month. Let us just have the idea, write it down somewhere and walk away from it. And if you still feel great about the idea after a point of time has elapsed, then let's come back to it. Because otherwise it's actually ego. It's my ego getting in the way. And I think it depends on your personality type. I think like maybe it's different for you than it is for me. I think you have a slightly different way of responding.
Yeah, it's true. Everyone is unique and we have different ways of responding, as you say. I think you're right. We shouldn't act on every idea that we have. Absolutely. We need to sort of focus and go for these things. But it's one of those ones that as we evolve and get better at, say, meditating, that's when we know the difference between ego voice and actually sort of intuition. Because people want that recognition, maybe of being on stage, for example, and other times actually, no, this is your calling. You are here to influence and impact other people. And when you know your human design, then absolutely, that kind of almost reinforces who you're meant to be. And it's great to have that clarity. So definitely an episode on human design. That'd be a great one to do. But I hear you on that. Don't act on everything because otherwise you just get overwhelmed.
So in terms of your life, I think we're so different. That's why it's great doing episodes like this. Like for me, I'm the controlling one of like, between me and you, I'm the controller and you're like the abdicator. That's like we're like the two ends of the spectrum probably on that regard. So I feel like letting go, what does that mean for you? Like, what have you taken from that?
It's that lack of tension. So things happen, maybe arguments happen with family, loved ones, whatever it might be, but it's taking a step back and not reacting, but actually being proactive, and again allowing the conversation, maybe asking questions and resisting the urge to shout and get frustrated and annoyed and let the anger rise, which is effectively a negative vibe, a negative feeling, and make sure that you're approaching things from a position of acceptance, of love, of seeing both sides and wanting to see both sides of the situation. Go, okay, this kind of negative thing that's happened to me, what are the positives? What is this trying to teach me? What's the good about this? So if we can approach everything from a position of love, acceptance, neutrality, then things tend to flow more easily. So so as you mentioned at the beginning, it's not worrying or anxiety, it's just allowing things. So I tend to be one person who rather than react in the moment, I would take a step back and then I'd come back to the conversation after I've thought about it. And I think that's definitely the same for some people, less so for others that react straight away.
I think also like it's interesting because I feel like when we talk about letting go, and by the way, that letting go book that you were talking about earlier, just if you definitely go the surrender experiment book before you do the letting go book, because that letting go book, I can't read that. I'm not smart enough for that book. I should remember, I'm smart, I'm not intelligent. He is one intelligent Man, Dave can read that kind of stuff, and it sounds like maybe you can as well, but I cannot. So if you want a simpler book, definitely the Surrender Experiment.
Yes, and the Untethered Soul, definitely.
Great concept. But I was like, when I was going through this, I was like, yeah, Letting Go. That sounds like a book that I really want to read. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
no, this isn't quite what I'm in the market for. But very important big ideas, but just hard to conceptualize and get your mind around. For me, like Letting Go almost feels like you're kind of running away, letting go of things. But I actually think there's something about letting go which means you're still running more towards you're walking towards your fears, and you're letting go of the thing that makes you want to resist, like going against it. Because I think where we see fear or things that we want to hold ourselves back from, that's often where the biggest magic is. So like letting go doesn't mean that you avoid
That's
and
right.
push away from those things. It actually means that you step into and embrace it, but you let go of the reaction that you have to that. And I think I love the way Michael Singer talks about this in The Untethered Soul. He just talks about this idea of, you do things that scare you, and you just become aware of what that sensation of fear is like. And he talks about just like relaxing your body into that sensation, like opening up your heart. And yeah, it can be quite uncomfortable for a minute, but actually once you let go of that, you realize the thing that looked like a monster is actually just a really nice tree that you could just go and admire for a minute. Like your perspective shifts.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And it leads to better opportunities, serendipity, and other things that happen in your business that had you been steadfast and stuck with a particular plan, suddenly now you've got a new opportunity, almost a bigger and better opportunity, like you gave earlier in the conversation about the podcast and how it came about. So it's just being open to things, and being proactive towards them rather than resisting, and that holding on to that tension that so many of us live with, which is really just fear.
So tell me the main takeaway, John, that you want people listening to this to go away and move forward into their lives.
Okay, so I would say read the book above all, because it will explain it so much better than, or in more depth, and when you spend time with something like the Surrender Experiment, then you'll learn it to a much deeper depth than just hearing a podcast on it. So absolutely read the book. Secondly, that is the master skill. The master skill in life is surrender, letting go of the tension that we hold on to in most of in everyday life. And if you can be present and aware of how you're feeling, then you're really in touch with your emotional body, and you'll live a happier life, and you'll have less disease, because all the tension that you hold in your body really eventually manifests as disease. So that would be my takeaway: is read the book and let go of tension in the body and just be present. How about
Nice. Mine would be, if you have been a very structured, controlled, planning person by nature, which I know there's a good chance you might be if we've attracted you here, to just play around with if you kind of flipped it to the other side sometimes, what that would feel like. And I think that's one of the lessons that we've had. It's like life is like a pendulum. So if you have been extremely one way, you also must have to like course correct by going a bit extremely the other way to be able to find more of that middle balance point. So maybe just play around sometimes, particularly with smaller things that feel like less important decisions. What happens if you kind of allow yourself to let go and go with the flow a bit more, and to, as you say, to relax and release the tension? Just experiment, explore what life might feel like if you were to do that, because that will just give you access to a whole new level of joy in your life,
which we all want.
So there we go. Take forth more joy, more letting go into your life. Doesn't mean that you stop trying hard, doesn't mean that you don't stop going for the things that you want, but you just make the process more fun. Oof. Well, I hope you made the connections there between the surrender, the letting go, and how that all links into freedom, which is what we are all about here. And if you want to come and spend the day diving into freedom and making sure that you have got your freedom plan mapped out, then check out our event, Finding Freedom Live, which is going to be in London on the 11th of July. And it's all about creating financial, time and location freedom through property investing. So we're also going to be talking about what this letting go means, bringing it to life for you so that you can really experience what that freedom really feels like. And then we're also going to bring it into the more practical solutions when it comes to time management, prioritization, productivity, and how to hire and manage a remote team. So full day in London together with myself, Dave and Dom. If you want to come and join us, you can find out all the information on our website, which is property-strategy.com/FFL for Finding Freedom Live. Now, this time next week, we are going to be joined by Simon Tandry, who has been an incredible force for change in all three of our lives, myself, Dave and Dom, and is going to be talking about how actually you've got to destruct to grow, and actually through crises, you can find a stepping stone to your greatest evolution. A really interesting conversation. You're going to love Simon, so I can't wait for that to be launched this time next week. So until then, have a great week ahead.